Like to ask a question or make a comment?
Hi. Yeah, you said you were surprised at the results you found after looking through the archives. It sounded as if you had a bit of a preconception about what you were going to find, but you found something different.
Yep.
Or have I misunderstood you?
No. Sheer sectarian prejudice on my part. I didn't think that the Cuban Communist Party had played a great role in the. I came to the conclusion that there was sufficient evidence to prove me wrong, and I was so. And I think that it actually was quite nice when you do find something, you know. And I'm very much work with documents. I'm not very good at interviews. I tend to get in argument with people. But when you actually find down there in front of you on a piece of paper from the time something that goes, oh, I never expected to find that, and so that is really kind of quite nice. And really, was what makes it worthwhile doing it to me, to actually prove yourself wrong.
In the same line, and I think you mentioned the role of the Communist Party later in your talk.
Yeah.
But initially you said that the working class was well organized and was a good type of organization, very organization, but solid. And I think, as far as I understand, is the work of the Communist Party in terms of historically in the island.
Okay.
As well,
Yeah.
as well, because I'm basically, as far as I remember, my reading in my early 20s, one of the strong Communist Party within Latin American context was Cuban, Uruguayan, and Chilean Communist Party. So therefore, it is historically it's not a tendency, but it's just focused work in terms of organization of the working class.
So yes, I mentioned the Cuban Trade Union Confederation, the CTC, that had been set up by the Communist Party, and some had been the work of some of their quite legendary leaders, and people like Jesus Menendez, Araceli Iglesias, and loads of ordinary rank and file people. In 1947, the government of, first of all, of Ramon Grau and then of Carlos Prio, moved against the communist control of the CTC. Jesus Menendez, Araceli Iglesias were shot. A dozen others or so were shot. Many were beaten. The worst one, it strikes me, as I used to be a bus driver. Poor Carlos Febles was asleep on his bus at the terminus when a gangster got on and blew his brains out. So control of that union federation was taken by force and by corruption from the Communist Party, and many of their most experienced militants were either killed or or many were dismissed from their work. There were lots of and so on, and effectively their control of it was broken. Outside of the tobacco industry, I would argue, and the docks, and they maintained their control of the movement within those two industries. But that was a very severe setback that the party leadership didn't really know how to deal with. They floundered, I would suggest, from say 1950 through to about 1956-57, and there were many, however, ordinary members. I mentioned Juan Tacachel, the sort of the leader of the Santiago Dockers. There are loads of people like him, but I would argue that the central leadership they'd got themselves committed to this line of not really working with the July the 26th movement, of and it took pressure from their own rank and file. And there was within, I mean, Carlos Rafael Rodriguez, always very pro the July the 26th movement. He was the one that that the Communist Party sent up into the hills to negotiate with the July the 26th movement. There's been lots of arguments about when the Communist Party first of all supported the armed struggle, and I will say March 1958, because I've got a copy of their paper Carta Semanal with the headline "Why We Support the Sierra." You know, so that was their first public statement, so I think there was a period when they'd kind of got a bit too comfortable in control of this very effective pre-1947 movement, which was, as I say, probably the most effective in Latin America, which is why the government wanted to smash it and take control away from these people and kill all those who couldn't be bought. So that would be my argument. But then you know, so you know, there was a period when they were floundering, but they kind of got it together, and they got it together slightly earlier, I would argue, than was previously thought.
Okay, Steve?
Yeah, I was going to elaborate a little bit on something you said there, because I think one of the reasons for the historiography being underplaying the role of communist militants was that at higher levels there had been, the hostility went both ways, actually. The communists didn't like the putschists, and the July 26 movement didn't want to wait for long stages of history to pass before they could overthrow the dictatorship and so on. But also there'd been other historic splits that affected the attitudes amongst the rank and file. So, for example, when in the 1930s the revolutionary government introduced the legislation against foreign labour, most of which was black sugar workers from the British Caribbean. The nationalists, if you like, the pre-orthodox party militants in the trade union movement, supported the national labour protection legislation. The communists opposed it as racist. Later on, it went into the constitution, and as far as I know, it is still constitutionally something that's there. Because it was in the first labour, the labour content of the 1959, whatever it was called, the immediate law, which was then referred back to in the constitutional debates, had that in it as well. So that was one division. Then, of course, the Communist Party went into office with Batista, not in the 52 government, so there was more suspicion. And I think it's not very surprising when you read the history of that period in the 50s that although in local areas there were completely reverse relationships, these relationships existed. They were manifested in the post-1959 debates over control of the CTC, and they infect the historiography.